Hello, welcome to the Common Sense Show. I'm back. It's Micah. I am excited to be here. I feel like my seat is out of frame. I'm not exactly sure how that happened. I'm not 6'5", so I'm not exactly sure. I kind of got out of the frame. But anyways, I have a wonderful opportunity today to speak with the CEO of Norhart, Mike Kading, and I'm going to get to him in just a minute. But first, before we do, I wanted to just remind you that there's a couple things I have that I'm working on coming up. One of them is a business mastermind, and so I'm working on a 3-day. I'm calling it a business common sense business boot camp mastermind, and I don't have a date for it yet. I'm going to try to work it out. I have a very busy next few months, but you should just keep that on your radar so that when it comes up, you can be ready for it. But anyways, so today we're going to get into how Mike is changing the game in real estate, how his new innovative solutions and approaches to building and designing real estate cash flows and makes it more money, because maybe you can yourself find a way to implement some of the principles that he has into a real estate business that you have yourself. That's what the point of this show is to get you to turn your businesses into income producing assets that allow you to win back time, gain freedom, and live life on your own terms. I had a disruption there. Anyways, let's get into the show and talk to Mike. Hey, Mike, welcome to the Common Sense Show. How are you?
Doing great. Thanks for having me. This should be fun.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously you run a business called Norhart, and give us a overview of who New Norhart is, what do you all do, and what's your value proposition?
Yeah, at a high level, we design, build, and rent apartments, but we're really about driving down the cost of housing. We're already achieving about a 20 to 30% reduction in cost. We believe we can achieve a 50% reduction overall. But imagine what that means. That means someday your rent could be half, or your mortgage payment could be half. So our ultimate goal in life is really to solve America's housing affordability crisis.
Yeah, it's interesting because there is certainly, well, there's a couple issues with housing. Number one, there's the supply is not there. Number two,
Yes.
it's not nowhere ironically close to where it needs to be. Um, but then there's the affordability crisis, right?
Mm.
So for those who do have houses, depending on where you are, the cost of rent and mortgages is it's insane. And so I like I mentioned to you, I live in Boston, and we've gone from maybe being the seventh or sixth, seventh, or eighth most expensive city to like rent or own to being like number two or three, and it's pretty insane right now. And of course, inflation has has people who are buying homes who could buy a home for $600,000 like a year and a half ago, only able to afford a house that's worth 300,000.
Yeah.
Literally, it's insane. So, tell me about how you all, what's your focus on um, reducing costs? What is it that you do that actually makes the difference?
Yeah. The reality is, it's a lot of little techniques. One way to look at it is uh, industry has improved productivity by 760% over the past 60 years. Agriculture has improved by 1,500%. During the time period, construction has done just about nothing. They're at 10%. And so
Mm.
what we're doing is we're taking the innovations and things that these other industries have learned and applying it to construction. So the
Mm.
first example of that is we started to bring all of the work under one house.
Mm.
In construction, typically the owner is different than the developer who coordinates and finds new sites, who's different than the general contractor who coordinates the construction, who's different than your subcontractors who are doing all the work, the plumbers, electricians, HVAC. And to get all these different parties working well together, given the fact they've never met each other, they're new on each project, is a tall order. I mean, imagine if a car company or if construction was to produce cars. They
Mhm.
would have a different company installing the windshield, a different company installing the door, and a different company installing the wheels. And of course, the wheel company would have something going on. They'd be backed up. They wouldn't be able to come out there for a week or two. Your whole production line shut down. And then when they did come out, they'd be upset because they can't install, they can only install one wheel at a time. They want an entire warehouse full of cars to work on at once. And
Yeah.
so that's sort of the start of the things that we do to reduce costs.
Interesting. So, um, you became you brought yourself, I'm assuming, further upstream to prevent yourself from being affected by the uncontrollable arrangements of the middleman. So you cut the middleman out of some of your projects. And of course, there's savings in that just naturally because things get less expensive the further upstream you go. How do you handle the human labor part of this? Because oftentimes I assume that second to certain building materials, the second highest cost of building is the labor to
Oh,
actually put it together.
absolutely. It's going to sound a little bit strange, but we actually pay people the top of the market.
Mhm.
And the reason is, and what we've found this over and over again, is that we're fighting to find the very best people. And we literally fly people in from other states into our state every single week to work and fly them home because they're best in the world in the little niche that they do. And so what we have found is that the best people outperform the average ones by 2, 3, 5, even 10 times as much. And so
Mhm.
even though they're more expensive per person, so paying them top of market, they're actually less expensive when you're looking at what they're producing. And then
Mhm.
when you tie into that you build a stronger, better culture as a result, it's a no-brainer for us. So yeah, we fight to find and hire the very, very best people.
So the Pareto principle kicks in there.
Yeah.
You find the 20% of people who are doing the 80% of the work
Exactly. That's exactly right.
and go right after those people. So is it are they so not only are they bringing their experience and their ability to deliver in a more efficient, faster basis, what else about getting the top of the market, individuals at the top of the market helps to produce a better outcome for you when the project finishes?
One of the big things I've learned is that amazing people can solve incredible problems. And so there were issues and problems that we ran into before, doors that felt closed, that as soon as it was a point in my life that I realized how important it is to find the best people. We made a change. We actually laid off most of our staff and rehired on a whole team. And once that new team was in place, like things that I thought we couldn't get past before, now were easy or easier at least. So that's one big aspect. Another big one is the tenacity to take on new things and to change things. So, for
Yeah.
example, this past year, we now moved into precast concrete as well. Precast concrete are these giant beams and columns that hold up sort of the core and the foundation of a building. And there's only a couple of companies in the entire Midwest that do this kind of work. And so the teams like we had issues with supply chain and pricing as well with that. So, well, what if we learned how to do that? What if we brought that in house? It was a crazy idea, been super easy for traditional people to shut it down, but with the team, the caliber that we have, they're like, let's do it. There's
Mhm.
issues and challenges along the way, but that energy and oomph and excitement is just absolutely refreshing.
So you're saying that your company is focused on staying in the forefront of innovation and newest products come in the market because the construction industry is like historically slow to adopt in some
Yeah.
respects. And then, the only thing that matches the slow adoption in construction, in my opinion, is the stubbornness um, and the bullheadedness with which people continue to um, feel they assert in their wrongness about something in construction.
Oh
Is that something
yeah.
that you've had to have to deal with?
Absolutely. It's rampant in construction. We often say that construction typically does not have great culture. There's a rough and tumble environment. I've heard so many horror stories because we hire a lot of people,
Mhm.
and it's just not a great culture. There are good gems here and there, but in general, it's not. So one of the things that we change there is to build that right culture. We
Mhm.
find people that are wanting to try new things. We find people are positive and upbeat. We find people that are willing to challenge, encourage, and coach and help others be successful, even if it makes them look worse compared to that other person. But once you
Right.
start building that kind of culture, that kind of environment, magic happens.
So, how do you? Okay, so you kind of have maintained an innovative drive and to apply that to your how you build. And you talked about how you bring in people who are typically not the least expensive cost of labor to implement and to bring innovative solutions. How can someone who's a developer that's not the size of Norhart implement this in their projects to be successful? Like someone who develops three family housing, duplexes, maybe four families. I'm sure that Norhart does maybe some of those, maybe not, but looks like you tend to have larger projects.
Yeah, we
So
do.
what is it that builders can do to take some of the principles that you use and implement it into their own construction firms?
Yeah, it wasn't that long ago. We were a small, very small real estate company as well, and we were using these techniques. And so I think the first one and the most important lesson I've ever learned is hire the best people. So
Mhm.
that's partly on hiring. It's recognizing that paying top of market is actually going to save you money in the long run. It's better to hire two great people rather than four average people,
Mhm.
and then be really active about building that right culture. And so I think that starts with yourself as a leader, right? Look in the mirror and say, am I the traditional construction leader, or am I willing to bridge out, and am I willing to learn from people like companies like Google and Netflix? I'm willing to learn that kind of environment. And then you want to be really active about how you maintain their culture. So, for example, know what your cultural or your values are, the things that describe the kind of people you want to have, and then be active about letting people go that don't line up to those values. And I think that's really where the rubber meets the road, and can be really tough and tricky. But don't just gloss over that. Make sure you're doing that part right as well.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. One of the things that I've observed about a lot of construction firms is that finances are like the biggest issue,
Mm,
like and just managing the cash flow that comes in. And often because of the nature of the construction industry, there's a large cash flow that comes in, and then there's large cash flow that goes out. But handling that without having to rob Peter to pay Paul because you you didn't account for the cash in, how that relates to the project, and actually sticking to that and not getting another job to pay for the previous job
mm.
and then having to balance the books that way. How have you found financial success in managing cash flow?
Well, I think for us, the big thing is we've been able to drive down our costs. And so our costs are already about 30% less than the value of the project.
Mhm.
So that gives us some buffer room on that. But then as far as cash flow on a day-to-day basis, I think again it comes back to having great people. If you have the right person in the right seats to help that, like, life just gets easy. If you got the wrong person, it's a it's a pain. You're having to oversee it. You're having to watch every little part of that.
Right.
Another piece is make sure you have cash set aside for a rainy day, or some access to cash, like a line of credit. If you're running things razor wire all the time, it just takes one little hiccup and you're out of business. And I just don't think that's a good approach.
Yeah. It's true. And I think that once you start having employees and your employees are relying on a paycheck on a regular basis, like almost all people do who work today, um, then it's irresponsible to make these kinds of decisions that could affect people's lives, right? Where,
Yeah.
because of your lack of ability to manage, or you don't have a CFO, or whatever the case is, you don't actually. I just had someone on, Jody Grundon, last week. His company does virtual CFO services, and he
Oh,
talks about organizing, um, how a lot of companies are not organized with their financial statements. And he's like, you'd be surprised how many multi-million dollar companies out there still have no organization with their financial documents. And um, it's a really, it puts the whole company in a bad position, particularly the employees who are relying on the job to be successful. um, what is your goal in trying to solve this housing crisis? Like, what are some of the goals that you're trying to accomplish? Are you working with city governments, municipalities right now, and leading the way in how you all build and design, or what's your strategy for that?
you know, long term, we want to solve America's housing affordability crisis. And I don't think that gets solved necessarily by taking government financing or anything like that. So we do have relationships with cities, but it's not in a capacity to try to pull money from them. The way we think about it is that the money that we're earning today, because we have that profit margin, we don't necessarily lower our rents below anyone else, make people pay fair market rates. And people are like, well, you're about low affordable housing. Like that doesn't seem right. The reason is we take those profits and we put it back into building the machine that builds apartments. And then as that grows, as we expand rapidly with that, our hope is in the next 10 years to reach 192,000 units at a 60,000 unit per year pace. At that point, we're starting to impact the nationwide market in a way that impacts supply and demand. And with a ever coming amount of supply, that brings down pricing for everyone. And so I think that's how you solve it sustainably long term. Elon Musk talks about how producing a car is hard, but producing the machine that builds the car is so much harder, 10 to 100 to 1,000 times harder. It's the same here with housing. I think we can build decent housing on a one-off basis. Many people could do that effectively, but to build the machine that builds housing in a low-cost way at scale is incredibly hard, and that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah. So this is you're trying to solve a macroeconomics problem through microeconomics, essentially.
Yeah.
And it's funny because it's, so the theory is that through the rapid expansion of or flooding the market with a supply of housing, because how efficient you can build these projects or construct them, that it will blunt force trauma the rent, so it will suppress the rent down, and then it will provide that relief of rent in the U.S. Some people might say that that's a little pie in the sky, and how can you do that? We're talking about 50 states. We're talking about however many millions and millions and millions of acres of land in the U.S. We're talking about 300 million people. We're talking about how can Norhart affect the real estate market in that particular way?
I think the first thing is we have to have a model that's actually producing units at a lower cost point. And so we're doing that today, which I think is one of the hardest things to accomplish already. And we have further to go on that. We want to get that down to 50% reduction in costs. So I think that's step one. And I feel like we're a good chunk of the way on that. Step two, which is sort of what you're alluding to, is scaling up.
Right.
And scaling up is really hard. We've been doubling in size more or less every year. So we have a feeling of what that feels like. But it's not like one key issue. There's not one key problem. It's 10,000 little problems. And so the way we think about it is we have to have the capacity in our team to be able to solve the problems that are coming in at the rate they're coming in at. And so that's what we're building up, and we're doing it substantially right now, is building up the capability to solve the problems as they come up. And then there's systems and infrastructure and things we have to put in place as well, including we got factories down in Wisconsin. We're expanding down into Mexico. We're doing some work in our first facilities in Texas. But what gives me confidence, and I've seen this over and over and over again, I don't necessarily know all the answers today. I know the general path, but I don't know all the answers. But what I have incredible confidence in, and they've convinced me of this, is the caliber of the team and the team's ability to solve the problems as they come. And that's what I think we have that gives us a shot at solving this at a much wider scale. If we didn't have that team, it would be impossible.
So what is your company manufacturing? So oftentimes the builder is not also the manufacturer.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about you going upstream to prevent the middleman from delaying your progress. And obviously, if you're trying to scale at the rate that you're talking about or affect macroeconomic change, then you would definitely have to have a hand in manufacturing. So let's talk about that. What kind of role does you manufacturing play in this process, in this scalability? And have you chosen to prioritize manufacturing some things and not other things? I'm assuming you have. And what are some of those things?
Yeah, so we jumped into precast concrete. We have our facility in Wisconsin that's doing that now. We're also into steel wall panels. And so these are completed exterior walls that have vapor barrier, the siding, the windows, everything in there. We just set them in place like Lego blocks.
Yeah.
So we're doing that. And those are two easy ones. Well, precast was really relatively easy to select because of the supply chain issues with it in pricing. steel wall panels. We just had to solve that part of our business. But now we're looking at things like cabinets is a big one. We looked at things like drywall. I don't think we're gonna get into drywall, but we explored it. There is kitting of parts that we're looking at doing. We're even starting to work on moving more toward volumetric pre-assembly. So like entire units being produced in a factory. I don't know if that's the most cost-effective approach, but somewhere between wall panels and full volumetric we'll probably land on. So that gives you some flavor of the things we're working on today.
Yeah. So some of the more time-sensitive components to completing the project.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. What challenges have you had balancing the manufacturing side of the business with the construction side?
I think the biggest challenge is it's just so hard to create a manufacturing plant and doing something new. You get in there and you try something and you realize this is terrible. And then you're like, okay, here's a step better, and it's a little bit better, but still terrible.
Right.
And then you just keep iterating, and it's a slog. It's hard. Elon Musk talks about how hard it is. It really is. And one thing I've very much learned is whenever you start something new, you're terrible at it.
Yeah.
And then you try again a little bit, you're constantly terrible. And that's just part of life. That's part of human nature, and something you just have to become okay with. You have to like get comfortable in your own skin of like just failing a bunch. And just getting past that failure is a lot of work.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's interesting. So I'm also, in addition to the host of the podcast, I'm a CEO of a manufacturing firm. Actually, we build building materials.
Hey.
So one of them is this thing right here. This is
okay.
This is a decoupling raft connector.
Okay.
And so it basically decouples the gypsum from the superstructure, so the studs, and then it also works in floor ceiling assemblies where it decouples the ceiling from the floor assembly above, right? And then it attenuates sound as it passes through from.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah.
And it actually works with metal hat channel and wood furring. And one of the things that because we've created the process for manufacturing these things, so I understand the manufacturing challenges that you're talking about. But what I find and I want to hear your thought on this, because what I find interesting is when we go to a builder and we talk about this decoupling product that works in wood, and it's the only one that accepts wood furring in an assembly that's UL rated, the least restrictive assembly, right? When I say all that stuff to a builder, I find them very hard to believe me, because they're used to using legacy products like the other clips that are on the market, and like resilient channel, things like that.
Yep.
Have you found people doubt your ability to do what you say you're going to do with the company? Have you had any of that pushback?
Oh yeah, all the time. I mean, there are haters and doubters and stuff out there. And I think at some point you have to hear the feedback. You got to hear the feedback that is most useful to helping you improve and grow. But if it's just someone out there to be negative, that's you can't dwell on that too long.
Mm-hmm.
But I love seeing stuff like that, because we actually brought engineering and architecture in-house now as well. So we have a whole team in place because we were seeing some of those issues, right? Mm-hmm. An architect is not, even a builder is not really incentivized to try and find new products. They want to come up with the plan they know it's going to work, meet code, and get it done and out the door as fast as they can.
That's right.
And we realize it's just not a good fit. We want to reinvent this industry. And so we have our internal team now. They're not incentivized to just race out the door. They're challenged with finding the best way to design our product, which is the buildings. Yeah. And so I love seeing products like that. That's cool.
Yeah, no, it's so true, because one of the things that I found in this process of manufacturing and distributing to builders who are building on a larger scale are that's exactly right. When we deal with the people use assemblies that they've used for years, wall assemblies or floor ceiling assemblies that they use for years, and they just assume it meets things like code. And one of the things that's happened, for instance, in the Boston area and other areas around the country, are that residents are getting tired of, and this is an acoustic product, so residents are getting tired of the number one complaint. You don't have to know anything about real estate, and
sound.
It's sound. That's
yes. Right. Oh my gosh, yes.
Specifically impact installation class. And there is a mandated code for sound that people don't know about. And architects just assume that their previously built assemblies that people are complaining about still work. And but now what's starting to happen is people are hiring lawyers instead of inspectors and to solve
Oh.
this issue. And so what we're seeing is we're seeing more and more lawsuits from coming from the ground up from people who are tired of living with noise. And
Mm.
and so we've been able to take that and leverage it, of course, to our marketing benefit, which is what you're supposed to do when you have a disruptive product in the marketplace. Um, but how have you been able to so how so I want to talk about labor because this is a very interesting thing to me because labor is always the biggest challenge in most cases, but in particular construction for a few
Yeah.
reasons: reliability, cost because of reliability. Let's talk about boots on the ground labor. How are you able to also get your guys on the ground to commit and to actually feel like they're doing something bigger than just themselves? Is that the actual magic bullet, or what do you see happening with like your retention of of your labor force, like your actual operational labor on the ground?
Yeah, our retention's quite high, and I get people coming up to me. I'll give you one example. Just last week,
Mhm.
we had a meeting or company-wide event that was going on, and one of the employees stood up and said at the event, like, "Mike, you should be changing this thing for this other employee." And I was like, "Oh yeah, we've been talking about that, and we worked out the solution. He was good to go." And that the other employee was a relatively new employee, and he actually came up to me literally in tears. He said, "I've never worked for a company that people are willing to kind of stand up to the CEO, have that dialogue, and then for the CEO to listen, and then
Mm.
for my problem to be solved and like for us to fix this, like this is amazing. Like that's the positivity, the engage, the kind of culture we built is very purposeful for that kind of exchange. And it's been amazing. And because of that, people feel connected, right? They feel supported. They feel like we're here in it for them. And that creates an amazing environment. But it's really hard to find. You gotta find the right people, and that's really hard to do in construction. We face the same problem. And what we did to solve it, not exaggerating, we hired 14 recruiters on staff. And now for every position we hire, it's something on the order of 100 to 1,000 candidates that they go through before picking one out of that list. And oftentimes we don't even look at people. Well, we do. We focus primarily on like identifying who is the best person in these other companies, and then trying to build relationships with them over time to
Mm.
snatch them to come work for us. And so it just becomes a different perspective you're taking to make sure you're finding the best people. If you're just taking someone to fill a position, to fill a body, you're not at all in the right mindset.
Yeah, that kind of goes to like the timetables and timelines and the cash flow in the business as well. All those things require they speed up. So if people think about business in terms of like dominoes, what first domino falls and then all the other ones come with it. If your timelines are sped up, if you're trying to rob it, and if you have to have a timeline, meet a deadline because you have to get another payment to fund a project or fund the next project that you manage to cash flow poorly on, then that also has an effect on how hard you push your labor. And if your labor is not really, frankly, if they kind of fight back or they're a little slow, and like there's this tension between the company, the management, and the labor force, and so resolving that tension goes a long way in helping to develop happier employees that actually produce more. Is that something that you found that there's that
Oh,
because you are
absolutely.
that framework that it's a different relationship? Totally.
Yeah. At orientation, we talk a lot about this where what you have to have is you have to have a company that does all they can to support their staff.
Mm.
And then you have to have staff that's doing all they can to support the company. When you have that marriage, it's amazing. If
Mm.
either part of that falls apart, it's broken. It just does not work incredibly well. And so, yeah, we go to quite extremes to support our teams. Even things like here's one little tidbit. Uh, we stole this from Google and Netflix, but we have unlimited paid time off for construction workers,
Mhm.
right? Like we took literally all the benefits that Google has and said, okay, we're giving it to our staff, right? It's those sorts of things that start making people feel like they're well supported by the company.
Yeah. Yeah, I went to the unlimited PTO route too, and it does. You know, the funny thing is that people don't take it when it's unlimited. It's like the money back guarantee. You know, back in the late 90s and early 2000s, when like during sales training, they would have you like talk about, oh, if why don't you just buy this product or service and we have a 100% money back guarantee. And then the reality is that when you have 100 percent money back guarantee, nobody actually really takes it because
Yeah.
they usually forget about it, or they don't want to deal with it later. But like I find that our demand for time off has not increased since we have unlimited PTO. So what do you want people to know about your mission and what you're doing? What's the next step, like beyond 2023, next 5 years for Norhart? Like where do you see the business in, like, say, 2028?
So we're basically growing toward that. In 10 years, 192,000, 60,000 units per unit per year. The Over the next 5 years, we're really working on expanding to just a couple of states, primarily focused on Texas, and really ramping up our model, driving our costs from that 30% down to maybe 50% reduction in costs. Working on international. We got a sourcing team now in China and in Mexico, in the United States, sourcing materials better, and really just trying to build the the manufacturing capacity to build apartments. It's
Yeah.
really that simple.
Yeah. I find that when you can actually speak simply about your operation plan and your business, those are the businesses that tend to win. Like
Yeah.
businesses that make their businesses so complicated, and you have to have a degree in rocket science to try to figure out exactly what what a business is doing. Those are the businesses, they become so bogged down in all this and all the minutia of how to operate that they don't actually operate. And it sounds
Mm.
like you've built a winner.
Yeah.
Um, so how can people contact you if they're interested in? I see that you guys have an investor. Are you guys accepting investors now? Are you looking for investors?
Yeah, so this is new for us. We're launching the Norhart Invest platform. It gives people a chance to invest in what we're doing. The first offering is actually able to allow so anyone can actually invest. Traditionally, real estate investments are limited to accredited investors. We
Yep.
went down the more expensive and challenging route to get approvals to the SEC, which we're going through right now. And on that platform, people can earn a high rate of return, and they can lock their money in for different periods. It's up to you. But if you're wanting to learn more about that, you can visit our website, norhart.com. That's NORHART.com.
Awesome. And so I'll have a link in the description for that specific page, but also your website as well.
Yeah.
So where can people find out? Where can they contact you specifically if you want them to, if they want to know more about, Norhart, or are you the right person, someone at your firm that kind of handles these things?
Yeah, so if you visit our website, you can get all of our information there. You also can connect with me on social media. Most of my handles are just Mike Kading. And then one last kind of fun thing is that we're launching a podcast called Becoming a Unicorn. It's about the journey of small companies becoming billion-dollar enterprises. And we're hoping to launch that in the next couple of months as well.
That's awesome. I'm looking forward to actually subscribing to that.
Yeah.
That's going to be fun. Mike, thank you for joining today. I appreciate it. It's awesome learning about your company and what you all are doing, and it's refreshing to hear someone who is interested in innovating in the construction industry. It sorely needs it. There are things that haven't changed in the industry for decades, and people would be surprised because a lot of other industries like they invent themselves every year or every 6 months.
Yeah.
They'd be surprised to learn that the construction industry actually lags behind most other industries when it comes to like disruption and innovation. And if it's not on like the consumer facing software side for like an apartment building, it doesn't get innovated, right? So it's
True.
definitely difficult. But thank you for joining today. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right. Well, thank you. You just watched the interview between me and Mike Hayden. Let me tell you something. From my experience, what they're doing at Norhart is amazing. There are literally very few companies who actually identify the disruptive needs of the construction industry. And what they're doing there is that this is definitely a company to keep your eye on, because I think that what they're doing there is pretty slick. So thank you for tuning in today. And don't forget, if you're thinking about opening or starting your own real estate construction firm, some of the principles that Mike mentioned today are something that you can bring in your own business. He talked about how he reduces costs by bringing in the best people. They also have manufacturing that they do to help them source products for cheaper that they implement in their own building. Now, you may not go down the manufacturing route for yourself. It may be impractical for you, but the principles of business are there. He's trying to find ways that he can leverage great talent that do the job, as he mentioned, of 4 people in less time, and you can do the same thing. Don't just try to complete a project to try to get paid. You should try to get the best project that you could possibly build with the best people engaged in it. And then by doing that, you continue to have referrals. You have people who enjoy working for you. And culture is the name of the game right now with employees. So appreciate that. And if you're trying to form your construction company, don't forget you can go to Northwest Registered Agent, and they can help you form your LLC, and they can help you start your LLC for $39. They'll act as your agent, meaning that all the notices of service or whatever, they can be sent to them. They'll help you walk through the process of forming your LLC, and they can do it in any state in the country. If you like the information that you saw today in the podcast, don't forget to become a subscriber and let me know what you think about Mike's company, Norhart, in the comments below. I want to hear what you think about what they're doing, how they're trying to solve how they're trying to scale and solve the housing crisis. It's a big issue to solve, and I'm looking forward to kind of monitoring them as well. So thank you for tuning into the comments.